who you are and what effective exposure is and what they do and how we ended up here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Gary Soulz, right? And I am the founder of Effective Exposure. We are a music marketing agency that I went ahead and started back in November of 2020, right? That's when I went ahead and launched. So we've been up now for about 2 years, right? We're a young agency, but I've been in the music game now for, I could say 15 years now, right? I'm 30. I took music seriously at a very young age when I was 15, I would say. And I started probably creating music when I was like 12, right? So through that experience of me being in the music industry and trying to operate as a business, I went through a lot of trial and error, you know what I mean? And through that trial and error, I reached a crossroad in my life a couple of years ago prior to launching the agency where I realized that I had a lot of value to offer to up and coming musicians just like myself that are trying to get into this game and trying to make the best choices possible, right? Specifically in the music marketing space, because that's the most important part towards building a successful business in this industry. And so my intention behind starting the agency, because I found outside of creating music myself, marketing and the analytical aspects of music, I found that was also a passion of mine. And so I wanted to go ahead and dive deep into that and be of value to my network. And that's pretty much how I started the agency. And 2 years later, I have a team of about, I think 6 or 7, right, individuals. And right now we're helping quite a few musicians. And it's great building these campaigns and just pretty much guiding musicians through the process and helping them be efficient with their marketing budget and maximizing their marketing budget as much as possible.
That's awesome. I think you get a lot of experience from actually going through it yourself. Even I have somewhat of a similar story where like I started as a musician just because I enjoyed it. But then like eventually you kind of learn like if you can solve the problems even on a small level on your own. Like, how do I book a show? You know, like maybe you don't need to perform at the Grammys to know how to book a small show. And I think on myself, I never did anything too big or noteworthy when it comes to the music business. Nothing too big or anything like that. But like I did learn some of the small hurdles that it's almost like a coach. Like if you play football,
correct.
And even if I wasn't like, if I'm not a Hall of Famer, like I just kind of know what it's like to be a football player.
Exactly.
In that example. And not to say, obviously, you know, some of the greatest coaches, Bill Belichick, and I don't think he ever really played, nothing professional. Greg Popovich maybe played in college or something, but like, so of course there's exceptions to the rule. But I think in general, especially in the music space, just knowing what it's like to be the musician and knowing what it's like to be pulled in 100 different ways, whether it's how often you release a song, how do you promote it? Who do you promote it to? How much money do I spend? It seems like even the people with the best of intentions have these like cookie cutter generic answers that they kind of either just heard somewhere or they assume that's how it's supposed to be. And I feel like because there is no one right way to find success in the music business, a lot of musicians are still looking for like that step-by-step formula without even realizing that at the beginning, it's like we got to kind of blow this up and start with an experiment and kind of start to figure out what works for you, not like what 37 different musicians should be doing in general in some theory.
Exactly.
So like just kind of like being a musician to like now I'm the same age, I'm 30. And like as I got older, I realized I was like, well, okay, maybe my music career path is changing, but I still have some insight that I could offer the 22-year-old who's taking it really seriously now.
Exactly. No, we're on the same page there. And just to elaborate on those exemptions, you talk about those coaches. It's funny that you mentioned that because there's like video that I created where I touched upon something like that. When I first started the agency, you know, my biggest demon was that like, well, how am I going to get people to trust what I'm talking about if I don't have an incredible resume to show successfully in this industry? But to your point, you know, whether you were a football player at one point or you weren't, there's people that actually study the game and they study it from a perspective that is very unique. And those people are worth listening to. I mean, to your point, those coaches that you're talking about, I mean, the players listened to them and they ended up getting some championships out of it. You know what I mean? So it goes to show it's not just about having an incredible resume. It's also about studying or doing your research and experimenting. And people that take that walk and that process, those are people that are much worthy. It's worth listening to them because they're going to help you evade a lot of the BS in the industry that you're trying to find success, you know, particularly here in the music industry.
So when you were saying, you know, at the beginning, like, how do I get people to learn that I know what I'm talking about? Like, what were some of the strategies? Or I'm sure you tried, you know, 10 things and maybe 7 of them didn't work at all, but you found 3 that did. Can you tell me a little bit about that process? Or did you get lucky and kind of say, I'm going to do it this way and it worked? Or was there a bit of an experiment?
Honestly, I just leveraged my strengths and what I'm an expert at, what I know. I leverage what I have proof of, right? So I started off with ad campaigns, right? Running Facebook and Instagram ads. I've been able to get positive results for myself, you know, when I was experimenting and I was learning marketing for me as Gary Soulz, the artist. And so I leveraged that as much as possible because I had proof. It wasn't just something that I read out from a book and then I try to apply it and tell people about it. No, like I actually have experience, and so that's what I leveraged that big time. And then from then on, I built off of that. And then I was able to gain more experience towards helping artists and seeing results and seeing what was going on and implementing my knowledge into the business itself. Cause I got to market the business too. You know what I mean? So I leveraged that as well. Hey, look, like I'm finding success with the business using the same marketing fundamentals. At the end of the day, marketing is marketing. The fundamentals can be applied within any business in any industry. So that's really what I leveraged for the most part, is what I knew for a fact was the right thing.
When you say, so you're coming from a place where you're marketing your own music, right? And like you initially have some sort of like emotional connection to it, it's your music. Did you find that when it's still your business, but what were some of the things that you picked up on when you noticed, okay, hey, marketing music XYZ works really well, but when it comes to this service, ABC seems to work well. Like, did you see that there are differences, or do you kind of stick to the same thing no matter what it is that's being marketed?
Now, it definitely varies, like that, taking a look at the analytics, understanding like the sales cycles of the industries. For example, at the end of the day, like when you look into the details, marketing agency or service-based business versus marketing a musician, there's going to be a lot of differences there, 1000%. But as far as the fundamentals of reaching a cold audience, optimizing for specific behavior, and that behavior coincides with a desirable action towards your business, and then capturing that, redirecting that traffic, retargeting, all of that, those fundamental aspects, those core pieces of marketing work essentially throughout any business or any brand within any industry. It's just now the details do change, obviously. Like you can't get on a call with the fan and trying to get them to buy your merch. Like that's the difference. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like things like that change, along with other details. But again, the fundamentals do apply. And when you see it work, then that provides confidence in knowing when you are speaking with a musician, you have the foresight because you have the understanding through your own failures and knowing clearly what didn't work.
I think that's funny. I think so much of the value that I can offer a musician, say like who's starting out and starting to take this whole thing seriously, I really feel like 80% of the value that I can provide is in what not to do. Like don't do this. I tried this. Don't do this. Don't spend your money here. Don't do that. Don't do this. And it's one thing to just be like, I don't like it. But I think, say, oh, don't do this. I don't like it. A smart musician will say, why? And is it just you don't like it, or is there a reason to not promote here? And like, I can see the appeal for somebody who is an artist who's just starting out, say their first EP is coming out and nobody knows who they are, but they're considering spending that $2,000 to have like a banner ad on like
World Star Hip Hop.
Yeah, World Star, right? Exactly. And I can see the allure of that, but like the reason I would never say, oh yeah, go do that, is because like for that particular example, like that only works if if I'm a fan of Wiz Khalifa, I already know I'm a fan of Wiz Khalifa and I'm on World Star that day and I see the announcement that he's got an album coming out. Me, I already know I like Wiz. Great. Now I'm aware of it and I'll look for it sooner or later. But if you're some artist I've never heard of, it's some banner ad and I don't read it at all.
Doesn't appeal any interest to you whatsoever,
Right. And a lot of like, I find, at least for like a lot of the conversations I have with musicians, isn't saying, because some people might come to me, hey, like I've saved up a bunch of money. I'm thinking about doing this on World Star. Like, what do you think? And I'll be like, no, because these reasons, not just, no, that's dumb, or no, I don't like it. No, you should do this. I think that's a part of it, is a lot of musicians come in, what should I do? As if someone like you or me has like a secret code that like, haha, well, since you asked, here's the secret code. Like there is no set path. What worked for Russ 10 years ago is not necessarily going to work for you now. Like what worked for Michael Jackson in 1986 is not necessarily going to work for you now. Like
100%.
So
now, I mean, to just elaborate on that, when it comes to advising musicians, and perfect example, as you mentioned, like should I spend this money on a World Star Hip Hop or on this package of getting on BET Jams, MTV, getting my music video played in these channels? There is, like you said, you can go ahead and you can't work for somebody, it might not work for you and vice versa. But what I've noticed is that there is some type of fundamentals that when are applied, right, it's going to work with everybody, right? And the fundamentals, what I've realized is in the very beginning of marketing music, you want to be able to have as much control as possible with how you're going to place your product in front of consumers. You know what I mean? And how that's going to go about controlling the ability to actually not just become a listener, but be able to go ahead and become a fan, an interested buyer at one point. And when you talk about the banner banners or the BET jams or paying to get on playlists, like, and that's your main focus of fan base building. The way that I see it is you're at the mercy now of the consumer listening, liking it, and then from them going out of their way to check you out. And in the beginning stages, you don't want to leave yourself up to the consumer to do all that. You need to have as much control in that aspect, along with where you're driving traffic from. True, I think being able to control that is super powerful, right? Or super important, really. And in knowing that there's tools out there that give you that ability, you want to leverage those as much as you can in the beginning and scale your business in that way so that you can set yourself up to actually generate a return on investment, which is the whole point of why you're investing into marketing in the first place. When you're approaching it from a business perspective, that's the end goal, period. And so later down the line, as you implement these aspects and you are continuing to grow, then that's when you have an audience that you can influence. Now you can go ahead and spend the $2,000, like you said, on a world star or getting your music video circulated in these MTVs and these BETs or etc. PR, right? For example, trying to land on like the Fader or Double XL. You can do that later down the line when you've already built an audience that has bought into you, that want to buy from you, have already bought in from you. And now you're just trying to build more trust. Up until that point, there's really no point. And I believe that that's a fundamental right there that I'm talking about. Back to the main point of this. If you leverage that, it's going to work from artist to artist. Now, the details, like for example, there's TikTok influencer marketing, etc. That can, depending on your brand, depending on your style of music, that might work for you, that might not work for you. But as long as you stick to those fundamentals and understanding what the real goal is at hand, which is generating a return on investment, that's going to work from artist to artist, no matter what style of music, genre, etc.
I think the fundamentals there, you got to have those in place. I often say it's like artists want to go build a skyscraper and they don't build a foundation first.
Correct.
They just try to build, and then the wind comes and it knocks it right over. And what are some of the fundamentals you see that like folks are like they have blind spots for?
So like one of the fundamentals is, for example, they're trying to go ahead and sell merch immediately. They want to drop an album and sell merch immediately. And they don't understand that you have to go through the process of creating trust with an audience first before they become somebody that wants to buy from you. Because the reality is, as a musician, no one needs to buy from a musician. That's a fact. And that's what makes it challenging. Why it's so hard to be successful. Because nowadays, there's no need to buy the album to listen to your music. They just pay the monthly subscription to a Spotify, to an Apple Music, and they have all of the access in the world to any artist's entire catalog without paying a direct dime to the artist outside of just the royalty streams. So that fundamental aspect of, I got to go ahead and provide value through my music, through resonating content on social media, and going about the process of continuously hitting them with that value before I go ahead and decide to do an email list or attempt to create an email list or attempt to generate sales. Like, you have to go through that process first. You can't just go ahead, expect to launch merch and think people are going to buy just because they listened to the album and that's the first time they ever discovered you.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I think often musicians operate in the mindset of like, well, this would be ideal for me. Like, yes, it would be ideal if you could drop an album, make some t-shirt and sell 1,000 of them. Yes, that would be ideal. Is that how people shop or operate or do anything? Okay, what's great for you versus how do customers actually live their lives? How do real human beings go through the process of buying something from an artist, right? They don't think of that side. They think of the side of, well, yeah, it would be. That is a way to make money. I should have merch because people buy shit from artists they like, so therefore I should sell it. But they don't even think of like, well, I don't have anybody to sell this to. Yeah. It's different than, because artist merch in particular, it's not about, oh, wow, this shirt is the nicest quality shirt ever and it's super comfortable. It's about showing fandom or support for an artist that you saw a show for. Or I saw the Chili Peppers in concert this year and I want to remember that and talk about it the next time I wear it at a cookout or something. It's not about like, oh, wow, I just really like this design from some artist I don't know, and now I'm going to spend $35 on the t-shirt. Like, maybe, I'm sure that happens here and there, but like if you're an artist making band merchandise with your logo on it, the only people who are going to buy that are people who are good fans of you. And like, merch is a good thing to have at some point for many artists, not a thing that's good at any time for any artist. And it's not cheap to make good merchandise and to have a Shopify site and to have some sort of shipping system and all this shit. Like hiring somebody to make the t-shirt in the first place. Like it's not necessarily super, super hard and expensive, but it's not like, oh, make a t-shirt and on Tuesday we'll have a new website and we'll be selling t-shirts on Wednesday.
I wish it was that easy.
Like, I think part of musicians getting caught up in that, thinking it's part of the same that they fall into like the shady marketing where like, oh, if it were so easy, wouldn't everybody have 10 million fans? And if anybody could buy 1 million streams for $82 on some Fiverr website, like if anybody could do that and it was legit, don't you think that they would and it wouldn't be that hard? But I think my long ranting here is, you mentioned it earlier, like you've got to think of it like a business. You're a musician who loves to make music, but you are a business who happens to be an artist. I'm sure there are artists out there who just want to have fun and they're just putting their music out there. That's fine. I'm mainly talking to the folks who want this to be their business and they're trying to do something. It's not easy, and merch should be something that comes at the right time. Same with a big marketing expense. There is a right time to go all in on your marketing. I guarantee you it's not at the very beginning when you don't know what you're doing. Like you can scale into it. It would be a bad business decision. Say if you and I started a business and we got funding and some guy invested 100 grand into us and he loves our idea. It would be dumb to say, let's spend 80 grand on the first month. And when we're figuring out where our market is, what products work best, let's go all in at the beginning and just hope for the best. And then later on, I guess, I ran out of money. I guess I'll get back to you in 3 months when I have some more money. And just like you can't operate a business that way, you can't operate a music business that way. And if you only have $5,000 to promote this year, that's okay. But it's much better to spend $500 a month than $3,500 in January and then be fucked for the rest of the year. Oops. And it's maybe you spend $250 each month and you scale up, and then by month 6 you start realizing, wow, this audience here, guys in their 20s in Houston and LA who listen to Blink 182 also listen to me, and the ads that I've tried, this ad works the best on TikTok and I'm going to spend this much money. And now you have like a clear answer of like, this worked, and this worked. So now I'm going to go all in, rather than I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go all in at the beginning and hope for the best and hit boost on Facebook. And that's all they do. And then that's it. And then nothing happens. And then they say Facebook ads don't work or blah, blah. And like,
exactly. And then they have a perception on the tools that are actually very useful when you know how to use them. I mean, I couldn't agree anymore to your point. Like you said, the timing and the calculation of when you do things in this industry is so important, because through my own experience, I've seen, I've invested a lot into myself, my hard-earned money when I was going through that process. And I can see how quickly you can spend a lot of money and get nowhere. And so the calculation aspect is very important. And a big part of that is knowing what to put the majority of your money into. And you need to identify that first. And so a big part of how we go about helping my clients with effective exposure is step one for us is helping them identify the best performing release in their catalog. Like that's the most important thing, because that right there is going to allow us to know what single in your catalog creates the best first impression amongst your target audience, right? The first impression is everything. And you want to make sure that you're not spending a crap load of your budget thinking that that song's the one without even testing to see if it's actually going to be received well, and be able to have the ability to look into the analytics and determine, is this song worth pushing past a month, past 2 months, long term, a year and a half, and build pretty much your core fan base with. And that takes a lot of testing, like you said, a lot of experimenting and being able to know how to look at the analytics, how to interpret the analytics, and be able to make the best decisions for your business, which I feel like that's where leveraging expertise, people that know, that have been in the industry and have really studied, are of most value to musicians. That way they're not going through the painful learning curve. 3 years later, go by 4 years later, and then you have $20,000 later and you're like, crap, I finally got it. I had to go through a lot of trial and error to understand this. Should I just went ahead and leverage expertise, I would have skipped that learning curve within 6 months rather than 3-4 years.
Yep. Yeah, and spent $5,000 instead of 20.
Exactly.
When you're determining the song that works best, what is a metric? Is there the metric that you look for, or is it really a case-by-case basis?
I look for multiple things. The first thing that I'm looking for is, what is it costing us to get a consumer over to the streaming platforms, right? That's the first thing that I'm looking for, specifically within the targeting parameters that we're going to have set, right? Ideally, if we're working with an American musician, we're looking to see if we can build them a centralized audience, right? Rather than a scattered audience. So let's try to see if we can find a song that can convert really well, perhaps under, $1 per DSP visitor within 10 states or less. And so we're looking to test that. And then from there, if we're getting a favorable cost, a cost that is keepable, well, how is this audience consuming the single once they land over to the DSPs, right? First, actually, well, what's the click-through rate, right? Typically what I look at is a click-through rate between 50 to 65% or more. That helps me determine how intentional these click-throughs were, right? And that lets us know the strength of the ads and how sold they were to actually go check out the single. And then from there, we look at out of all of these click-throughs that occurred, let's say on Spotify, since Spotify typically is the best, I would say, back-end platform with analyzing data and interpreting, the consumption of a single. Then you look at, okay, cool, well, 250 consumers, let's say, went to go listen to the song on Spotify. And out of those 250, 125 became an earned listener, right? And then out of those 120 earned listeners, 80 of them saved the song, right? And then a month goes by, the stream per listener average is over 3.5, 4 streams per listener. Now it's like, okay, cool. They're liking this song a lot, right? The analytics clearly are showing that we have very intentional consumers going to listen to the song. The ratio between them giving the song a shot to them becoming a listener is about 50% or close to it or more. And then those consumers, a majority of them, past 40, 50% of them are actually saving it, which means they're going to listen to this song again in the future. And the majority of your streams are coming from those types of listeners. This is a song worth pushing because we're also getting it at an affordable cost at a very tight targeting parameter. Now we could build your audience in markets we know that in the near future, as long as we're consistent and we don't go 3 months and then we stop and then you come no, we go all the way through a year and a half, 2 years, right? And I tell, artists that it's going to take about that time, especially if you don't have a $2,000 monthly ad spend budget or more. Time is our ally at that point, consistency and time, so we can build trust with this audience. That's how we go about identifying, how is this song worthy of pushing and making it what we call the best performing release or that anchor release, right? That song that we know day in and day out, we're making sure out of your budget, a specific amount is going into driving new consumers with that single.
Well, I think you mentioned something important that I think, like you said, the marketing has to convince somebody to give us a chance. And I think that's another part of that musicians often miss. They're like, well, the music's great. It's going to speak for itself. Well, that's not the job of the music. The job of the marketing is to convince somebody to give that music from some artist that they do not know, to give it a chance. And let's say, okay, there are far less new movies coming out, even on streaming and out, there are far less movies coming out than songs, right? How many trailers of a movie or a series have you seen somebody trying to convince you to give them a chance that you have said, nah, not for me, and never checked out? 90% of them. 90% of them. Right? And I bet there's 100,000 new tracks uploaded on Spotify every day. And that includes podcasts and like audiobooks and shit. So 100,000 a day. There's no way there's 100,000 episodes and movies uploaded on like Netflix a day, right? No. So my only point is it's hard to convince a casual consumer to give something new from they've never heard of a chance. It's saying if you saw a trailer of some show and it looked okay, but you didn't know any of the actors, it's unfamiliar to you, you're probably not going to try it out on your own. It's going to take a friend saying, dude, this show is really good. You should go check it out. And you trust your friends, so you say, okay. Same with an artist. You are one of 100,000 songs that were uploaded just today. Every single person who sees that song come up randomly in an ad or on like a TikTok algorithm where it's just kind of going through, it's on a radio station, on Spotify. It is hard to convince somebody to say, you know what, I will try this. Because like most people know they're being advertised to. Most people don't give in right away, even if the ad is fantastic. They don't give in right away from a fantastic ad from a brand they're familiar with right away. It takes a lot to convince somebody who does not know you to try something of yours, especially in music where there's 100,000 new options every day. I say all this to say, as a musician, like you said, this is going to take some fucking time. Like you got 2 years here, because if you don't have 20 grand a month, there's no way to speed this up unless you happen to catch lightning in a bottle by making fantastic content. And if you, now that's this, you can't bank on that either. That's the same as saying, well, my financial strategy is dependent upon winning the lottery in the next 2 or 3 years. And if not, I'm fucked. That's a shitty plan. So like you can't account for, oh, I'm going to go viral if I do this. You have to have a plan that is not built around hitting the lottery, and it has to be consistent, and you have to temper your expectations. Where like if you do an ad campaign with Gary for 2 months and you spend $1,000 total on an ad, like, and you get 500 new monthly listeners. I don't know if that's actually a good example, but let's say 5,000. 5,000 people chose to click on that ad and they listened past 30 seconds, enough to count as a monthly listener, and said, this was for me. That's a killer ad. But like, I can see being the musician be like, I spent $1,000 and man, I only got, I got 2,000 streams, and like, but it's because they don't know what to expect.
It's not only that, is they don't know what they're actually paying for. Right. I love that you brought that up, because when you're running advertising, right, like Facebook and Instagram ads or any ad platform, you're not paying for the stream. I tell artists that all the time. You're paying for that person going out of their way to check out your product. That's like, imagine us like, running ads for like our service or whatever. And we're counting up how many views we got on the ad. Like, that's not what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking for people taking a desirable action, and that action of someone going out of their way to listen to your music, that's huge, right? Because to your point, like you said earlier, they don't know who you are. You randomly popped up on their timeline, and there's nothing in the ad that is familiar to them, but yet you still got them to go through. That intention right there, that potential, it holds a lot of weight, and that's what you're really paying for. So don't look at the stream count. Look at what it's costing you to get somebody to do something like that. Because like you asked me about the movies, right? Well, I ask artists all the time, when was the last time you clicked on an ad, right, and actually went through to go listen to someone else's music? And the majority of them are like, crap, you're right. I'm like, exactly. It's not, the chances of you doing it is very, very slim. So for those that are, that's huge. That's something that you got to be very grateful for, right? And we got to capitalize on that, because that's only one half of the puzzle. The other half of the puzzle is getting them sold on who you are, right? Which I would say in this day and age of being a musician, that's the most important part now. I would say 10 to 15 years ago and prior, yeah, the music was really what got consumers sold and wanting them to buy. Now it's becoming more of who the person is, right? Because there's so much access to new music on a daily basis. So easy to get the music value has dropped, right? It's not as valuable as it once was. So now you have to really appeal to consumers based on who you are, what you're about, what your experiences are. That's what's going to get them connected. And like I said, that's the other half of the puzzle after identifying a best performing release and getting listeners, right? Because that's not going to make you profitable, just getting listeners as a musician.
You've mentioned a lot about, profitable, getting an ROI. What are some of the steps that you can take with the musician, like say at the beginning of working together, where even if they have a large budget, how do you properly set that monthly budget?
Well, I tell them, how much can you spend on a monthly where we can keep this consistent, right? Because you even mentioned it earlier. You have a $5,000 budget for the year, but you spend $3,500 in the first month. That's not smart, right? So let's go ahead and budget yourself where this can go ahead and last for months on end, right? And it's probably better to go ahead and invest, less of it towards the beginning while we're testing. And once we really find what's working for us, then we can go ahead and put more pressure on the campaign, right? While we're seeing that it's actually working. So that's typically how I help artists with their budgeting, and especially in the beginning.
Okay. So for whatever reason, it cut out like good 5 or 10 seconds of what you said at the beginning. Should we do that question one more time?
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the steps that you can take, with an artist at the very beginning of trying to establish what their budget should be?
Yeah. So typically what I like to ask is, how much can you invest on a monthly where we can keep it at that budget, right? Where it's not going to hurt you financially, and we can keep it on a month-to-month basis. That's something that you're comfortable with investing every single month. And we can go a year, 2 years, with that budget consistent. That's the first thing that I like to go ahead and ask. And then obviously too, though, making sure that when we're testing, we stay away from spending a lot of money in the very beginning. And as we get more results, as we find songs and campaigns that are working for us, then that's when, if you are comfortable with putting more money and increasing your monthly ad spend budget, well, once we have that identified, I can give you the green light. Say, hell yeah, if you can go ahead and go from 500 to 700, 800 a month and still make that a consistent number, then let's do that. But let's first figure this part out first.
That's a great plan of attack. I very much agree with that. Start small. You can always scale up. You don't want to make the mistake of, we spent a ton and oops, I made a mistake. You can always start small and say, hey, this is working well. Let's spend more. And I've seen many times where like just throwing more money at the problem doesn't solve it either.
It's not going to change anything.
Even with good advertisements, there is a point where you can overspend on either you're hitting the same audience too many times and it's becoming annoying, or ad fatigue is what they would call it. But then there's also ad fatigue can happen where just the same ad or the same audience is getting stale. You either need to switch up the ad and hit the same audience with something new, or you need to switch up the audience. So even on both music and the agency side, I've definitely seen parts where we say, hey, month 1, this worked really well. Month 2, spend more money. Worked really well. Month 3, spend more money. And then like month 4, spend more. And like, oh, we see it kind of regressed like percentage wise, because it's like, I think there's a ceiling here where we should really only be spending this much and that on that campaign. And a lot of times folks will say, I've been advertising on Instagram a lot and I've been spending $75 a day and I want to go up to $100. Maybe with that additional $25 doesn't need to go all into Instagram where you're already doing something. Maybe that $25 a day could go into TikTok or could go into YouTube, where now your overall strategy is growing outward rather than just up in one place.
100%. No, I think you nailed it in the coffin right there, right? You have to be very mindful with, how much you're investing and what makes sense, because we could reach a point where we're experiencing ad fatigue or the cost is just going to increase, right? The more we put into it, just because it's reached its capacity, right? Amongst the audience that we're targeting. I experienced that day in and day out. So it's knowing, if we do reach that and we're looking for more at that point is, okay, cool. Is this the song that we should continue to market if you want to invest more? And this is what we're experiencing. And then I help make those type of choices. So we're not, stuck spending more, but we're getting less. And obviously we want to see growth, right? And that's another thing that I was listening to you kind of appeared in my mind. Artists sometimes don't understand like the cycle of consumers listening to a song, and they might go ahead and see their day to day, they'll spend more money, but they think that's automatically going to generate more daily streams on ad spend. But you have to understand, listeners also reach a point where they listen to a song 10, 15 times that you'll capture them a month ago, but they're stopped listening to the song, right? And so then there's also new listeners coming in, and then like the algorithm might not be triggering at the level that it was a month ago. So all of these things take place, and you have to understand that the cycle of consumers listening to music isn't as simple as, I'm putting more money in and I'm just going to get more daily streams every single day and it's just going to go up, 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 up. It doesn't work that way. There is highs and lows with it, and you have to consider the fact that listeners, after listening to the song 15, 20 times, their desire to want to continue to listen to the song is going to slow down also.
Yeah, that's a really good point, where like it's not like that daily stream number isn't just exactly, it's not going to be a straight path. The only number that could be that would be like maybe the total number of listeners who have ever listened to a song from you. That might be the one that could continue going like this, but the rate in which they're listening is going to fluctuate. I think there are so many songs where I loved them and they came up randomly somewhere. Somehow I loved it and that was it. That was the life cycle of that song. Wow, that was good. And it just never came on again. Like, I think when I was a musician and in my experience working with many musicians recently, I think that musicians understand what like a diehard fan is, but it seems they don't. They think that it's either they're unaware or they're a diehard fan. And like, I think people lose sight of the humongous gap in between where like, oh yeah, I remember some of his songs. They were good. I never followed him on Instagram. I never went and looked at his music video. I could care less about him on Twitter. Like, but like that some person could have heard a song a few times and been like, that's a dope song. And that's it. Like, that's it. Or there's just a lot of times where someone's like, that song's okay. Next. And I think like that doesn't mean you can't make money or have a business off of people in that gap. It's really hard to get somebody to be a diehard fan of somebody. And I really don't like the metric of someone who's like, well, imagine if you had 1,000 fans and all of them spent $100 a year on you. And like, I hear that all the time. And I'm like, look, I'm one of the biggest Eminem fans in the world, I would say. And I have never once spent $100 on any given year on any of his shit.
And that's reality. That's the truth.
Do you know how many streams would that have to be to get $100? Like in that it's like 40,000 or so, 4,000 or whatever it is. Okay, so if I listen to your song 4,000 times this year, you'll get $100 off of me. But that's probably not going to happen. So like, I don't like the metric of like, oh, a fan is one who will buy your merch. Like, yes, a fan is more likely to buy your merch, but I don't need to buy your merch to be considered a fan.
Yeah, that's why I differentiate with when I'm speaking with artists is there's fans and then there's customers. I want to help you get customers, right? I want to help you get a customer base, because a fan is, like you said, it's too broad, right? I'm a fan of many musicians and I've never put a dollar in their pocket, but I consume the crap out of their, their music and their content, etc. That's why you got to be very specific and very intentional with how you're going about investing your money. Because if you're not, you could put yourself in that position. You are generating the fans, but you weren't specific on generating customers. And so you missed the opportunities to capitalize on those that had the potential to become customers.
Well, and part of that is I think artists misidentify who customers are. Now, like one of the topics I get flack on every once in a while is I'm like, look, you don't monetize the music. You use the music to build an audience and you monetize the audience. And the best example is like a customer could be a venue owner who is not a fan of your music, but the product that they're buying from you is you're going to provide a service where you might put 250 people in his venue to go see you. So like the customer isn't necessarily a fan. Say a record label could be the customer. What they're looking for is going to be different than like what a fan of you might be looking for. They could very well go together, but they're going to be different at certain times. So musicians, like, I think they do misidentify who their customers are. Okay, if I had 10,000 monthly listeners in my city and some up and coming artist wants to get onto a song with me, he is now a customer, but not necessarily because my songs are great. It's because I have an audience that he wants to tap into. And I might have an audience because my songs are good, but there are a lot of artists who have great songs with no audience and they're not getting any money for any features because people are paying features to tap into the audience, not the talent.
Not the talent, exactly.
Unfortunately. Like, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just telling you, like, this is what's happening.
Right? Yeah, like, that's the truth. Yeah.
There are if I'm a venue owner and I'm running a business, a lot of musicians seem to think venues are charities, and they're not. If I have a bar or a club, whatever it is, I'm running a business.
Yeah. I need to generate a return on investment.
Or just like, okay, if it comes down to if I have an option for Friday night, my bar is busy no matter what. If I think that someone who's a 5 out of 10 talent, but man, they've got a big following, they seem to know how to market themselves, they told me how they're going to promote the show, they're going to get an 8 out of 10 turnout with a 5 out of 10 talent. Or you could get like, man, this guy is the most talented piano player I have ever seen in my entire life, but he doesn't know how to market. No one knows about the show, and I didn't sell any tickets. Which situation is the venue happier with?
The 5 out of 10 guy.
Right. Because like, okay, this guy, it's not all about the talent. It's part of it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not all of it. I was guilty of this when I was still doing music. I thought that like a surplus of talent would compensate for the lack of everything else. Where I didn't know how to market that well. I didn't really know how to do X, Y, and Z, but I thought, oh, well, the music's good enough. It'll take care of itself. But it's not the case because there's too much good music out there. And the difference between some of these acts is non-noticeable or razor thin. And it comes down, if I'm a record label and I'm like, wow, these guys they know what they're doing. They have all this stuff they're doing on their own in terms of content. They can book their own shows. They know how to record. They've got their producer. They're buttoned up. They know what the fuck they're doing. Or these other guys, okay, they're both an 8 out of 10. Who's going to get the deal? These guys.
Yeah.
Like or let's see, even this guy's a 9 out of 10, but doesn't want to market, hard to work with, doesn't want to make content, blah, blah, blah. And this guy's an 8 out of 10, but he's like crushing it and willing to play the game. Who do you think is going to get the deal?
Yeah,
unfortunately,
100%.
I think some purists out there are pissed about that. And like, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. But our job here is to just kind of tell you how it is on the business side, not like what it should be in, fantasy land.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, there's what you're pretty much pointing out is that there's differences between being a musician and a music entrepreneur. Those are two different things, right? You could be great at making music, but a terrible business owner, and that's going to reflect your success as a musician despite your talent, right? And vice versa, 100%. That all comes down to mindset, right? What's the mindset that you have? What's the approach that you have going into, attempting to pursue your music career? That's a big part. One of my closest friends, we had a conversation about that, how there's two types of mindsets. So there's like the dreamer mindset and then there's the entrepreneurial mindset. And a lot of artists are in that dreamer mindset, right? They're waiting more so for handouts. The excuses, I don't have enough money. I get it. Money's important, but it's not about how much money you have, it's what you're doing with the money, how you're investing it. right? What's the strategy behind it? That's way more important than how much you have, right? So it all comes down to the mindset that one is incorporating when they're making choices towards their music career.
Hell yeah. I like that a lot. Okay, well, so I know you've told me a little bit about the program that you are launching, or the contest, whatever program, contest, boot camp, whatever you want to call it. Could you let folks know a little bit about what you're rolling out and how they might be able to get involved?
Yeah, 1000%. So starting the new year, right, what we're doing is we're doing a giveaway that'll be launched right at the end of Q1, pretty much, March 31st. And anyone that locks in with us, whether it's starting with 3 months, right, of our ad campaign management services, if you are an artist that needs expertise in running campaigns, because as me and Elliot both discussed, it's inevitable. You need to run ad campaigns. You need to be able to market your music using those tools, but you want to make sure you're doing it at a high level. Then what we want to do is, with these 3-month bundles, if you purchase between now and by the time it's March 31st, you're going to enter a giveaway where we're going to go ahead and select 3 winners. One of the winners has the potential to lock in for an additional year, right, of campaign management with us. Our graphic design team, another winner, is going to have the ability to win 10 cover art designs, 10 visualizers, 10 lyric videos, and a website at no additional cost. And then our last winner is going to be able to lock in at least 3 placements, PR placements, with some pretty high profile press articles. So that's what we're giving away for our giveaway for this first quarter. And yeah, I mean, if you guys, like I said, if you're interested, anyone that's listening is interested, send us a DM at Effective Exposure, right? EFFECTIVEXPOSURE, or you can contact me directly via email, gsoulz@effectiveexposure.com.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good opportunity. I think musicians have enough hats on and enough things to worry about that ad management is one of the things that I recommend, like, taking off of your plate if you can. There are a lot of people out there who can run ads. I think fit is important, and Gary here definitely knows how to work with musicians, find out what song is working best, find out what ad campaign and what audience is working best, scale up from there. And then the contest part is just a sweet bonus. I mean, free ad management for a year and some PR, that sounds like a good deal. I think sneakily in there, that second place prize is pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean,
in the final round, I might throw it.
Yeah, man. Hey, it's just a way to just give back and help, because I understand how pricey things can be in the music game. I always feel like, from my experience, it's turned out like it's just like any other startup. Like, you might need startup capital in some instances, depending on your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. So anything that I can do to just alleviate that and provide a service that's valuable, but at the same time, it's affordable at the same time, I think that's super important, specifically with artists that are in their beginning stages of trying to roll themselves out and really be tactical with their approach.
All right. Well, anybody who's listening who wants to go find Gary, find him at Effective Exposure. And I'm excited to see what you guys all do with these musicians.
Word. No, I appreciate that, Elliot.
We can do a follow-up episode here with some of the results, and maybe that's something we could do. We could have an artist come on with you and kind of say, hey, here's what we did. Here's what it's like working with Effective Exposure. Here's what the campaigns are like, and almost give like a demo.
That's a great idea. Definitely. I think that's something that we should do in the between now and the next couple of months, and then just kind of actually have something in display. Actually, let's look into the analytics, right? So anyone that wants to listen or is watching, they can actually see what we're actually looking at and how we look at things.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, Gary, thank you very much.
Likewise, it was a pleasure to be on this, Ellie. I really do appreciate it.
We'll talk to you soon.